Revolutionary Girl Utena, or Shoujo Kakumei Utena, is one of those series you hear about a lot from hardcore anime nerds, but not one that, it seems, many people have watched. A friend of mine referred to it as Evangelion for lesbians and trans women, and while I'm neither of these, yeah, I can see that. I never was a teenager afraid of getting close to people either, and I still enjoyed Evangelion immensely. Honestly, I feel like a fraud sometimes loving all these stories about trauma that people relate to deeply, because my tragic backstory is that I was raised by two loving parents who did their best trying to care for an overly sensitive and probably autistic child in the 90s in a country that, not that much further in the past, cured being left-handed with slamming the dominant hand with a wooden ruler until the child learned to write with the right. I'm not making that up, my dad went through that and I'm very grateful teachers let me write with my left because I inherited that trait. TLDR, I'm not exactly the core demographic of Utena, but I did watch it and I love it deeply. It's a 10, if not for some issues I will address a bit later, it would be a 12. So there's your mandatory arbitrary score if you care for these sorts of things. Released in 1997 and animated by JC Staff, Utena is nominally a magical girl show, or should I rather say it has a lot of Mahou Shoujo DNA. It was made in part by the same crew that did Sailor Moon, and, allegedly, the series was derived from the original idea for the Sailor Moon Super S movie. And just like in Sailor Moon, expect reused animation in every episode, especially in the build-up for every fight. That's why the series is not a 12, by the way. I don't think this would be an issue if I watched the series weekly, but I was 4 and not living in Japan when it came out, and it does get a bit eye-rolly when you binge it. That and 3 recap episodes that you cannot skip. You can skip around them to dodge the parts you already know, but the extra content is vital. Trust me on this one. The series centers around a 14-year-old girl named Tenjo Utena, who within the first episode gets so mad at a guy for mistreating his girlfriend that she follows them, beats him in a duel with a bamboo sword, and then it turns out the duels on the school grounds have some downright ritualistic connotations, and this girl, Himemiya Anti, is now her girlfriend by law of conquest. Well, the term is rose bright and the series tries to act slick and pretend it's some magical anime bullshit, but 20 minutes prior we watched the gayest opening sequence possible without entering porn territory, so, you know, please don't slide in here saying I'm reading too hard into these things. I might be straight, but I'm not dumb. Utena tackles a lot of themes: fairy tales, gender roles and expectations, sexuality, domestic abuse, teenagers chasing after adulthood and adults shamelessly exploiting that drive, guilt, etc. I could talk about them here, but honestly, why would I? If you already watched Utena, you know all that, and somebody more qualified than me already made that video probably. I'll watch some analyses between writing and editing and post the card for my top 1 now. Boop! I made this video for people who haven't watched Utena, people like me who have heard of it for years but nothing nudged them to actually bite the bullet. Hell, I don't know how long I would still be sitting on it if not for the fact my fiancée wanted to watch number 6, which is also very gay, watch that if that's your cup of tea, and said she would watch a woman love woman anime as well if I wanted to balance things out. So I don't want to just throw out a full analysis full of spoilers here, because honestly if the text of Utena was the only thing of value in it, it wouldn't stand the test of time as well as it did. Anime is both a narrative and a visual medium, and you need to provide something unique with both these aspects to truly stand out from the crowd, especially as the crowd gets bigger with each year. So to avoid spoilers, I will tell you how a scene is used visually and what it conveys, but not provide any context on how we got there and what story beats it is used for, and I will primarily use scenes from early in the series. It's the show that is the talking, so let's try and get you interested in the dialogue. Before we continue, a small tangent. How often have you heard the phrase "show don't tell"? I hate it personally, not the sentiment, but the dogmatic fervor that is often behind those words when people say it. A medium should use all tools available to it, so for things like TV and movies it means showing and telling. And I think it is quite ironic that when something does show but doesn't tell, for example because it tries to tackle the topics of sex and maturity in an animated series aimed at teenage girls and airing on primetime TV, it is often met with voices of confusion and claims that the end result is unclear, confusing or pointless. Not to say that you're wrong for being confused by these elements, or that they can't be there just for aesthetic reasons. I think stuff like the ever-present rotating rose imagery is just there for the looks and not to convey any kind of message. Unless they are rotating, and a circular motion can also be called a revolution. The level of visual language in Utena is out of this world. Like, a lesser series would kill to be as good and visually distinctive in one of its scenes as this anime is in seemingly every episode. A lot of it is just there for fun. Characters talk a lot, so why have boring shot, reverse shot if they can discuss the same topics while playing badminton or throwing knives and stuff? You know, the kind of approach that made Bakemonogatari an engaging watch for millions of people. Sometimes it goes into full absurdity because Utena is more interested in the emotions of a scene than establishing any sort of logical throughline of how we got there. Let's say we need a character to overhear something for drama. A standard trope, right? So why not have her manning a whole radio station with comically oversized headphones on her head? And then move the camera away to show her being a few steps away and in plain view of the people who didn't want her to hear what was being discussed. Or let's say a character, coincidentally the same character, needs to be in mortal peril to have another swoop in and save her, another common trope, especially in romance series. Usually it would be a monster of the week in a fantastical story, but as Utena has a rather mundane setting, we would expect a car or a truck or something along these lines, right? But no Isekai Express for you, for the mortal danger isn't an animal set loose. A kangaroo with boxing gloves that gets knocked out to the sound of a bell in the ring. Surrealism is a word that gets thrown around a lot when talking about Utena, and it does fit on some level, but I think it's not an entirely proper fit. The point of surreal imagery in art, images that conflict with our mundane reality or are put in unrealistic combinations, is often to startle the audience with the unexpected or to provoke reactions not possible with mundane elements. Utena certainly does that, but I think the reason behind the use of these elements is much more straightforward than that. Utena tells a tale that has been told for an untold amount of years before it, of love, of societal expectations, of abuse. So why not tell it in an interesting, confounding way? Tropes are tools to be used, and the use of surreal, sometimes downright cartoony logic makes them feel fresh and still effectively gets the audience on the emotional journey they need to go through to make the emotional beats weave together into a cohesive narrative. And it's pretty funny, as a treat. The visual language is also used extremely effectively to convey ideas, especially emotional ones, without saying a word. Because having characters talk about their emotions in a show that makes a big deal out of how confusing feelings are would make the whole thing crumble. So it is extremely important for Utena to be able to convey these ideas in a shot or two, making an instant connection between the characters and the audience. Making you feel what they feel, or at least feel something, even if it's confusion, because that's also a completely valid reading of someone's emotional state when conveyed by such imagery. It also extends to visuals used outside of a single scene. You just need one look at Auntie's flower garden / greenhouse to get exactly how she feels about her position as a rose bride, even if she never says it out loud. Or how the visual language is used to compress rote storytelling bits into split-second moments. Take this scene, where a once alpha bitch girl loses her status and girls who used to be her stooges try to use the situation to establish their own dominance. Not 5 seconds later, the scene switches and shows you all you need to know about what happened between then and now. Absolutely masterful. This sort of cleverness extends to the writing level of the narrative as well. As a very simple example, the names of the main duo, Utena and Auntie. Utena is the Japanese name for a calyx, the leaves that protect the flower inside the bud and support it after it blossoms.
Utena.
Amphi, meanwhile, is derived from the Greek anthos, which means, well, a flower, which instantly paints the relationship the two have, not to mention it alludes to the fact Utena is a typical Japanese protagonist, while Auntie is, speaking in very broad strokes, from outside of that mundanity. There's also another character whose name is a direct reference to something, but they say it themselves, so, watch out for that. And speaking of characters, Lord do I love Utena as a person. She's probably one of my favorite protagonists now. I've heard criticisms that she's too reactive and doesn't try to look for a solution to the problems presented by the series herself, but that's kinda her point. Not only is she still a child, she wants to be Amphi's prince. and that involves swooping in and saving the day when need be, not making sure there is no reason to ever be a big damn hero. It does get addressed later on and in a beautiful fashion, but even without that, it was so nice to just see a main character that is just so earnest about what she's doing, even if she clearly is still figuring things out. Am I talking about her sword fighting, or her views on her own feelings? Yes. On the topic of good characters, you know how a lot of urban fantasy series have a character or two that serve as friends to the protagonist, only to get completely sidelined the second the supernatural shenanigans start, because they only ever existed to make sure the audience knows the protagonist is not a friendless loser? That character here is Wakaba, and Wakaba remains an important character and one of Utena's best friends throughout the story. Not by learning about the dueling business, but just by being, there. Someone that knew and was known by the protagonist for years, and the bond is portrayed and treated with the respect it deserves, instead of just being thrown away the nanosecond someone finds Narnia inside the closet. And Wakaba doesn't just exist to orbit around the main cast either, she gets her own arc in an episode and everything. I love this. Almost as much as I hate the fact that this caught me by surprise and felt fresh, not treating friendship as disposable, merely a tool to serve the narrative. Wow, how fucking original. I could go on and on, going more and more into spoilers, as I genuinely adore this series. I considered doing a spoilery discussion of the final episode right around here, but I realized it would serve nobody. People who haven't seen the series would avoid it, and people who have seen it would just hear someone repeat what they already know. So let me end with this. Revolutionary Girl Utena is very episodic in nature, reuses a lot of footage, and it had to avoid directly addressing a lot of its own themes to not get moral guardians breathing on their necks. And it is a masterpiece, with a final episode so evocative and poignant that the sheer memory of the music playing in it makes me teary-eyed. Go watch it. Don't be like me, forever pushing it further down your backlog because you don't know what to expect. Because, ultimately, it doesn't matter whether Utena is a show you expect it to be or not. What matters is what palette of emotions it can spark in your soul, and it sparked quite a lot in mine. I think this is what people call love. Have you heard? Have you heard, I wonder? This shadow plate is made possible thanks to my Patreon supporters, now visible on the screen. If you can, please consider joining this elite group, as any amount of support not only helps me not starve, it's also a huge boost to my ego that makes me want to create more. If you'd rather or not, please still share this video if you can. Getting big on YouTube when you have the charisma of wet cardboard is hard. Anyway, see you next time. Someday, together, we'll overanalyze stuff.